Life has a strange way of testing you in moments when you're already tired, when your mind feels scattered, when your motivation is low, and when you wish things were just a little easier than they actually are. And sometimes doing the hard thing, starting the project, ending the bad habit, getting up on time, facing the uncomfortable truth, feels like pushing a mountain with your bare hands. Your brain resists, your emotions resist, your body resists. And you sit there, wondering why even simple tasks feel like climbing a hill in the dark. But what if the problem isn't laziness? What if the problem isn't lack of discipline, lack of willpower, or lack of ambition? What if the real enemy is the way the mind reacts to pressure itself? That's where the Lotus Method begins. It's not a system of force, but a system of unfolding, a way of working with your mind instead of fighting it. A way of breaking the invisible resistance that stops you from becoming the person you already know you can be. And maybe that's the strange thing about human nature. We know exactly what we need to do, but we feel powerless when it's time to do it. We want to wake up early, but the bed pulls us down. We want to start the project, but we open our phones instead. We want to break the bad habit, but the comfort of repeating it feels easier than confronting the discomfort of change. Every person listening to this has felt that internal fight, the heaviness, the hesitation, the moment when your brain whispers, not now, later, tomorrow. You're tired, you're stressed, you deserve a break, you can start next week. And these whispers don't sound like excuses, they sound like truth. They feel reasonable, they feel protective, they feel safe. But that safety is a trap. A soft prison, a place where nothing grows. The Lotus Method was born from observing this quiet, inner war. In Eastern traditions, the lotus flower doesn't force itself to bloom. It rises slowly from the mud, through the murky water, toward the surface, and when it reaches the light, it opens. Gently, naturally, without strain, without fear, without convincing itself that it isn't ready. The lotus doesn't bloom because it feels motivated. It blooms because blooming is its nature, and maybe you've forgotten that this is your nature too. To rise, to grow, to reach upward even when everything around you feels heavy and unclear. But the lotus doesn't grow fast. It grows consistently. That's the first lesson. Your brain isn't asking you for massive leaps. It's asking you for consistency. But we live in a world addicted to big change. Transform your life in a week, change everything in 30 days, become a new person instantly. And then, when you fail to make this dramatic transformation, you think something is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong with you. Something is wrong with the timeline. You're measuring progress the way a machine would, not the way a human being does. The Lotus Method begins with acceptance. Acceptance of your current state. Acceptance of your limits. Acceptance of the fact that your brain doesn't trust you yet. You've told yourself too many times that you'll start tomorrow. Too many times that you'll quit the habit. Too many times that next week will be different. And your brain has learned that your promises are not commitments, they're fantasies. This is why the brain resists. It has learned to protect you from your own unrealistic expectations. But when you begin gently, when you begin honestly, when you begin with what you can sustain, the brain stops resisting. The water clears. The path rises. And maybe that is the real secret. Your brain is not lazy. It is protecting you from disappointment. So the Lotus Method teaches you to start with a stillness practice, not as meditation, but as observation. You sit with the resistance instead of fighting it. You notice how your mind reacts when a task feels overwhelming. You watch the excuses appear like clouds drifting across a sky. You don't argue with them. You don't push them away. You simply observe. And in that observation, something shifts. The excuses lose their authority. The resistance loses its speed. And the mind slows down enough to choose differently. There is a moment when you realize that you don't need to feel ready to begin. You just need to begin, gently enough that your brain doesn't panic. This is the second lesson. The lotus rises slowly so its delicate stem does not break, and you must rise slowly so your commitment does not break. Start with the smallest version of the hard thing. If you can't work for an hour, work for 3 minutes. If you can't clean the whole room, clean a single corner. If you can't change the whole habit, change the first 10 seconds of it. Your brain accepts small beginnings. It fears big ones. Small beginnings bypass fear. And once fear is bypassed, momentum begins. Momentum is the third lesson. The lotus does not rise, pause for a week, sink again, then rise later. It rises little by little every single day. Progress is built by rhythm. Your brain learns to trust you through repetition, not intensity. If you give your mind one small win a day, something incredible starts to happen. The inner war becomes quiet. The hesitation becomes weaker. The path becomes clearer, because your brain finally recognizes that change is not a threat. Change is the new normal. But the Lotus Method becomes even more powerful when you understand the philosophy beneath it, the principle of non-resistance. In Taoism, there is a concept called Wu Wei, effortless action. It doesn't mean do nothing. It means stop fighting yourself. Most people fail to do the hard thing because they resist the discomfort it brings. They resist the fear of failure. They resist the feeling of uncertainty. They resist the loss of the old version of themselves. But every time you resist, the task becomes heavier, harder, more painful. When you release resistance, when you let discomfort exist without opposing it, the task becomes lighter. Think of cold water. If you fight the cold, your body tenses, the shock intensifies, and the experience feels unbearable. But if you breathe into the cold, accept it, let the sensation wash over you without resistance, it becomes tolerable, even energizing. The same applies to writing, studying, exercising, changing habits, or starting difficult conversations. The more you resist, the harder it becomes. The more you allow, the easier the first step becomes. And that brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of human behavior. Your brain doesn't hate hard things. It hates uncertainty. When you make the task smaller, the uncertainty shrinks. When you repeat the task daily, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. When you stop resisting the discomfort, the brain stops sending warning signals. And suddenly, the hard thing is no longer hard. It's simply the next step. Just like the lotus rising through the water. But there is another layer, the layer of clarity. In Zen, clarity is not intellectual, it's experiential. You don't force clarity. You create space for clarity. When your mind is overwhelmed, cluttered, filled with 5 tasks at once, clarity disappears. That's why the Lotus Method includes a principle of single focus, one thing at a time. You work with the breath, with the moment, with the simplest version of the task. And as you focus on one thing, the noise dissolves, clarity blooms. And clarity is what turns motion into direction. People often say, I don't know where to start. But that's not true. You always know where to start. The problem is that the starting point feels too small to satisfy your expectations. But the lotus grows from mud, not from perfection. Your starting point is not supposed to look impressive. It's supposed to be honest. And then there is the discipline of stillness. Not meditation as performance, but meditation as returning to yourself. When you sit in stillness, even for a minute, even for a few breaths, you reset your system. You clear the emotional fog. You interrupt the cycle of reacting. Stillness slows the water, so you can see what's beneath it. It turns chaos into something navigable. And from that stillness, action becomes easier. This is why monks train in silence before action. Why martial artists pause before movement. Why thinkers breathe before speaking. Stillness is not the opposite of effort. Stillness is the preparation for effort. Stillness is the sharpening of the blade before the strike. And when your mind is still, your actions become deliberate instead of desperate. But there is another part of the Lotus Method, something many people avoid discussing. Patience. Not passive patience, but active patience. The patience of someone who knows that growth takes time, but chooses to show up anyway. You don't rush a lotus. You don't rush transformation. You don't rush the rewiring of your brain. You give yourself the time it takes to evolve, and when you make peace with the timeline, the pressure dissolves. And without pressure, your brain stops resisting. Then comes the final layer, identity. You cannot force your brain to do hard things if you see yourself as someone who always gives up. Identity is the soil from which your habits grow. When you see yourself as someone unreliable, your actions follow that belief. When you see yourself as someone who is growing slowly but consistently, your actions align with that identity. You don't bloom because you force yourself. You bloom because blooming becomes who you are. The Lotus Method teaches you to build an identity that grows upward. Someone who moves through life gently but persistently. Someone who acts even when they don't feel like acting. Someone who rises through discomfort, through fear, through uncertainty. Someone who trusts themselves enough to take the next step, no matter how small. And maybe the real message of the Lotus is this: you don't need to escape the mud to rise. You rise because of it. Your struggles, your failures, your fears, they are not signs of weakness. They are your soil. They are the pressure that shapes you. The mud is not the end. It is the beginning. The moment you understand that, you stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop waiting for the perfect time. You begin, now, with whatever you have, from exactly where you are. You rise gently, consistently, without forcing, without rushing, without demanding instant transformation. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you look around, and everything inside you feels lighter, clearer, stronger. You wake up earlier. You finish what you start. You handle discomfort like someone who has grown through it. You become someone your past self wished they could be. This is the power of non-resistance. This is the power of gentle beginnings. This is the power of rising slowly, like the lotus. And if this message reached you, if it helped you feel a little less overwhelmed, a little more centered, a little more capable of facing what you've been avoiding, I'd truly appreciate it if you subscribed and gave this episode a like. It helps us create more content for people who are quietly fighting to become better. And if that's you, then you're already rising, even if you don't see it yet.